Hello everyone, welcome back to another introduction to insect taxonomy. Today we're going to be continuing our talks or our discussion on the Odonata, which are the dragonflies and damselflies, and we're going to get into the actual dragonflies, the Anisoptera. So as far as we are in the evolutionary kind of clade representation, we're here and we should be wrapping it up today. If, like always, please like and subscribe, leave a comment, let me know if you have questions or anything. It helps me out a bunch. I like to talk to you guys. I've been getting more comments lately, and it's really nice to hear from people. So hit the buttons. Don't be stingy. It doesn't cost you anything. And I really, really do enjoy talking to you guys. So, like I said, today we're going to talk about the Anisoptera. Last time we talked about the Zygoptera, and these were the damselflies. So the Anisoptera are a little more complicated. These, what I've labeled as the families of interest, these are the families which you can find in the United States and Canada, so North America, north of Mexico. And I've divided it into kind of the major families and the minor families. The major families are considerably easier to identify, at least from information I could find, or limited information I could find on some of these minor families, particularly these two down here, the Macromyidae and the Petalouridae. I've never collected these two. These other ones I'm more familiar with, so hopefully I can make things a little more clear for you guys. But there's a lot of Anisoptera in North America, north of Mexico. In the US and Canada, there's approximately 325 species, and worldwide there's about 3,000 plus, something like that. Total worldwide, there are 11 families, and 7 of them are present in North America, north of Mexico, that is. To kind of touch on what we've already talked about, how to identify a dragonfly in general, the wings are usually held horizontally when at rest. You have, a long, thin body, generally a tapered, thin abdomen. The eyes are enormous because they're visual predators. They are all predatory. They have tiny little antennae. So if we zoom in here, you can see these little thread-like structures. Those are the antennae. They don't really use their antennae for much. The wings are membranous. They are similar, although not identical. The forewings and the hind wings are not identical, but they are large and similarly shaped. Whereas in some insects, the hind wings or the forewings will be significantly reduced. They don't generally crawl around. They're not very good with their legs, so they generally have to walk or they generally have to fly around. All of the immatures of the dragonflies, the Anisoptera, are aquatic, where they are aquatic predators, and they have a prehensile labium, like you have in the damselflies, where they can shoot out their lower jaw in order to grab things with it, like a prehensile appendage. And they have gills, which are located within the body in the rectum, so they can actually siphon water in and also use it as a jet propulsion system by siphoning water out rapidly. They are generalist predators in both stages, in the adult and the larval or the nymphal stage. Sometimes these nymphs in the older literature are called naiads, just like with the mayflies, but they're predators in both stages. The males and females in the adult stage are frequently different colored, so you can't necessarily go by coloration, although coloration is extremely helpful with this group, whereas in some groups coloration is a trick and you can't rely on it at all. Although if you are collecting them, the color of dragonflies can change after death, so you do need to be aware of that. So when we're talking about the major families, we will start with the Aechinids. You have the 4 major, most common groups: the Aechinidae, the Chordaliids, the Gomphids, and the Libellulids, which is a rather difficult thing to say. And then you have 3 minor families, which I will briefly talk about: the Chordaligastrids, the Macromyids, and the Petalaurids. So let's get into the Aeshnids, which there are 41 species in the US and 13 genera. Um, Most species are either blue or green or have some sort of blue or green coloration. Large membranous wings, usually not heavily patterned. Um, their compound eyes are extremely large and they will touch, um, which is important because not all dragonfly eyes touch. Not all or rather, not all dragonfly families have eyes that touch. And then the front and hind wings have similar venation. So one of the things that is brought up over and over again with dragonflies are these things called anal loops in the hind wings and then the wing triangles. And this is something that you can use to help you identify, at least to the family level, and then you'll have to use other characteristics to get down to a genus or species level. But the triangles are these structures, not black, I want this in yellow, are these triangular collection of cells found in the wings here and here. And in the Aeshnids, they're roughly the same size and shape. They have the same directionality. But in other families, they aren't like that. They'll either be different sizes, different shapes, different directions, or kind of missing. Or kind of a wonkier shape. But in the Aeshnids, if you see a bluish, this one's a little blue in the abdomen, a bluish greenish dragonfly with large eyes that touch and large membranous wings, usually unpatterned. Sometimes you might find a pattern, but usually unpatterned, whereas like with the libel eulids, it's usually heavily patterned. And these triangle collection of cells in the fore and hind wing that are the same size and shape and pointed in the same direction, then you probably have an Aeshnid. This is another Aeshnid, and you can see again the large compound eyes touch, and they have these large triangle collections of wing cells pointed in the same direction and roughly the same size. So definitely an Aeshnid. Very easy to identify, as in very direct characteristics. You're not going to necessarily confuse this with anything else. But yeah, 41 species and 13 genera in the U.S. And they're found all over basically every state. The next group in this list are the gomphids. And the gomphids are also a fairly easy to identify group. So the Aeshnids, I should have said, are in the common sort of naming system, they're called the darners. The gomphids are usually called the clubtails. And the reason for this is that they usually have this bulbous swelling on the end of the abdomen. Not always, but it's very common for you to have this tapering at the base of the abdomen, and then it swells out again towards the apex. For the gomphids or the clubtails, there's 100 species in the U.S. Scattered across 14 genera, so much more common than much more numerous than the Aeshnids. They are usually some shade of brown or black, and sometimes with yellow or green speckles, and this is kind of a camouflage that they have. You can see the wings are, again, pretty membranous. Their eyes do not touch, so they'll have this big space in between the eyes. Although they have very large eyes, they will never touch. So immediately, because their eyes are separated, you'll know that you're not dealing with an Aeshnid. And then, again, like the Aeshnids, they have these triangle cells in the wings that are similar size and shape. So you know that so if you just looked at the wing, you would think, well, it's either an Aeshnid or gomphid, right? At least from what we've talked about so far. But because of the eyes and this tail structure, you know that it's a gomphid. And then sometimes there's, with other families, there'll be something called an anal loop, which will be a collection of cells in this area. And with the gomphids, they don't have that. And we'll be seeing that collection of cells in just a minute when we look at other families. So this is another gomphid from a different angle. And you can see it's, again, kind of black and green. This is a camouflaging effect for the foliage. But again, you can see that the eyes are separated. Even though we're looking at it from the side, you can see that the eyes don't touch here at the apex of the head. And you can also see these triangular cells in this area here. You have these triangle cells here. This one is harder to see because of the foliage, but you can see that they're roughly the same size and shape, and they're pointed in the same direction. So fairly easy to tell these apart from the aeshnids. The next group is the largest, which is the next one that we're going to talk about are the libellulids, which is not the easiest word to say. There are 109 species in the U.S., scattered across 28 genera, and these are usually referred to as the skimmers because of the way that they skim across the water. Many species will have patterned wings or coloration in the wings, unlike the aeshnids. And they will frequently have distinctive colorations or distinctive markings on the thorax and abdomen. This one, if we zoom in here for the libellulids, if we zoom in on the triangles, they are not the same size and shape. So you have this triangle here, and you have this triangle here. They're pointed in opposite directions, and they're different sizes. So on this side, it's here. Let me change colors here. This specimen is kind of an orangey yellow, so it's not super easy to see my orange ink. So here and here are the triangles, here and here. So one is pointed this way, one is pointed down, and then down and to the side. So they're not the same size and shape. Additionally, you'll notice that their eyes are, again, touching at the apex, although they're not quite as heavily fused as what you'd see in the aeshnid. So this is an aeshnid compared to a libellulid. So the eyes are slightly different. And frequently there'll be a notch on this area here coming out of the compound eye. It's not super obvious in the photos because you need a good angle, but there's frequently a divot in the eye on the posterior side. And then this group has what is referred to as an anal loop on the hind wings. So it's frequently referred to as a boot shape. So not only do you have these triangles, but you have this kind of weird shoe-shaped vein that runs around. And this is referred to as the anal loop. And all of the libellulids have this. And most importantly, it kind of comes to a toe point. Other groups of dragonflies will have an anal loop, but it won't come to a kind of a toe point like in the libellulids. So there's one on each side. Here's the one on this side. They face inwards, and that is called the anal loop. So it's this. If I want to trace it directly, right, in case you're having trouble see it, it's this vein that runs around. That is the anal loop. And then on this side, so on this side, I didn't do it absolutely on the vein, but this would be the loop vein here on the inside. So that is the anal loop vein. That is foot-shaped. It's referred to as foot-shaped with a distinct heel and toe. So you have the heel here and the toe here, and that is unique to this family. Like I said, many species are distinctive colors. If we come to this one, you can again see the fused eyes or the touching eyes of the libellulids. Let's make this let's go with blue. That might be a little easier to see on this one. Because it's such a green photo. That better? Yeah, so you have the touching eyes. You can't really see the posterior margin here, but there is a divot. Because of these very darkly patterned wings, it's a little harder to see the venation. A lot of the libelulids will have black spots on the wings, but you can see one of the triangles here, one of the triangles here, and you can see part of the anal loop right there. It's a little cut off, but you can see part of it there. But yes, a lot of the most common libelulids that you'll see in the United States will have multiple black and white stripes on the wings, and a rather like a strong white marking on the abdomen. The common white striped libelulids that you will find just about in every state. The last of the largest groups are the cordeliids, and there's only about 50 species in the United States. The cordeliids are called the emeralds. There's 50 species scattered across 7 genera in the US, and they're called the emeralds because of their eyes. And this one is dead, and the color has faded somewhat, which is unfortunate. But I have some other photos here where their eyes, generally for most of this group, their eyes are a very, very bright green. Sometimes you'll see them with like a darker olive green eye, but most of the time they're extremely bright green, and they do touch, kind of like the achienids, and unlike the gomphids, which are really far separated. They have dissimilar wing triangles, so they have, here's one wing triangle, and the other one points down. So this is the other wing triangle. So you have one that points down, and you have one that points to the margin. So they're dissimilar wing triangles, and they do have a foot-shaped anal loop, but it doesn't have that. Let me get rid of these triangle markings. But it doesn't have that strong heel and toe. So this is the anal loop. It doesn't have the strong heel and toe like libelulids have. So let me zoom in here. So this is the anal loop, and it's kind of blunted. It's kind of a rounded or cut off structure. And then above that you have one triangle, and then the other triangle is up here. When the wings are stacked like this and you get the double lines, it can be a little confusing, but try to see as best you can. And then you have, generally you'll have green eyes that touch. In the next photo, you can see at these shockingly green emerald eyes. This is where they get the name. And if we zoom in on the wings, you can probably see a little bit of the triangles and the anal loops. So on this wing here, you can see the beginning of the anal loop. And above that, you have the triangle. And then on top here, you have the other triangle. So all the characters are there. It's just sometimes they can be a little hard to see. If you were holding a specimen in front of you, it would be a lot easier to manipulate this and get a good view of these characteristics. An interesting note with the cordeliids, they prefer to hang, like you see in this photo. They don't like to perch flat or to walk or to land on the ground, which some families prefer to land on a horizontal flat surface. Some prefer to land on a vertical surface. The cordeliids prefer to hang and kind of dangle off of a surface at a 45-degree angle. And then, so those are the major families. Now we can talk a little bit about the minor families. There's not a lot to talk about here. You can see there's very few species of these in the United States and Canada. Generally, there's only 1 or 2 genera within each of these families that are available in this region of the world. Let's see. This is a cordulogastrid. This particular one is from the UK, but a lot of the cordulogastриds look very similar. These are called the spike tails, which you can kind of see down here. The females have, or tend to have, a very long ovipositor that comes off their genital plate that they use to lay eggs, and so it's very diagnostic when you collect a female. Unfortunately, the males don't have the same sort of structure on the genital plate, where it's super easy, because on the female it tends to be extremely long. They're very large and slender and dark. They tend to be black and yellow. There's only 1 genus in the United States which is Corduligaster, and there's 9 species within that genus. Like I was saying, they tend to be yellow and black striped. The eyes just barely touch. If you were to look closer here, they just barely come together. They're not fused, and there's not this huge gap like you have in the gomphids. But they do, you do occasionally find these in the United States. One of the issues with a lot of these smaller families is that they tend to be extremely limited in their geographic distribution. If you were to look at the wings, you would see that they have similar triangles and no clear anal loop. The next group, the next tiny group, are the macromiids. These are called the cruisers, again with the very, very green eyes, but that's not diagnostic of the family. But they are historically considered part of the Corallidiids, which were those green-eyed, that green-eyed family. And you can kind of see why. It kind of looks very similar to a cordulid. I'm sorry, I can't talk today. All cruisers have a single stripe on the thorax, and most of them will have spots on the fronds, which is this here. This particular species is known to not have those spots. This is Macromia tenniolata, which is known not to have those spots. But if we look at another Macromia, you can see this very distinctive stripe on the side of the thorax, and that is present in all of the macromiids. So if you find something that looks like a corallidulid and has these very obvious stripes, maybe you have a macromiid. And then finally, we have the petal tails, which are the petallurids, sometimes called the petal tails, sometimes called the graybacks. And they are called the graybacks because they are usually gray and black. Very, very easy. These are the most primitive family of the dragonflies. They frequently, on the females, will have a very long ovipositor. They are very large dragonflies. They're large, grayish brown, or gray, brown, black, kind of neutral colors. And the reason for that is that they are generally found hanging out on tree bark. So this group tends to land vertically and hang out on trees. You can see this one is landed vertically on some wood. The eyes do not meet, so it's kind of like the gomphids in that the eyes are very far apart. Let's zoom in here. So you have this big space in between the eyes. They are very weak flyers, so they spend a lot of time landed on trees. They're not great at flying, which is kind of unique for dragonflies because dragonflies tend to be very, very strong flyers. And these are extremely limited in their distribution. Like I said, they are extremely primitive, and they are only found around the Pacific Rim. So for the US, you would find them around like Oregon and Washington and stuff like that. But in other countries, you would find them along the Pacific Ocean. And that is it. That is all of the dragonfly families in the United States and Canada. And now you can kind of tell them all apart. So this will be the end of the Odonata. The next group that I'm planning on talking about will be the Plecoptera, which are the stoneflies. And this is another group of semi-aquatic insects where the nymphal stage is in the water and the adults can kind of fly, although they're not very good flyers. But they are an interesting group, and that is what I will be talking to you guys about next. And I'll see you then. Thanks.